In an unprecedented move, we at High-Tech Lowlife are covering the Steam Next Fest once more. The truth is that every time I make a Next Fest video, I kind of feel bad for missing out on some demos, not showcasing some demos that I played. This time around though, I won't make that mistake. For those not in the know, the Steam Next Fest is a celebration of upcoming games. Every game featured in the Steam Next Fest has a demo of some sort. And yes, while a bunch of demos do persist beyond the Next Fest, some demos are time limited and can only be played during the event period. The Steam Next Fest also features multiple live streams from developers of these games. But we're mostly here for the demos, and we're gonna try them out. This is part 2 of the High-Tech Lowlife Steam Next Fest extravaganza. I've already covered some demos in some prior videos, so be sure to check those out after this video. But even as I cover this demo in multiple parts, there's a good chance that I might miss a few demos, so if you guys end up playing any demos that we haven't, be sure to hit the comments down below. And for those wondering, yes, we test all of these demos out on Steam Deck. Your mileage may vary if you decide to test these out on a different system instead. So without further ado, let's begin. Let's first begin with Johan the Parhelion. Inti Creates actually gave us early access to the demo last week. This is a Metroidvania based on a Love Life spin-off, starring Johan, not Yoshiko. One of the big features of this game is the fact that you can craft weapons on the fly. If you have the proper materials, you can craft weapons and equipment for Johan, and subsequently use them as needed. Also, parts of the game are supposed to have randomly changing layouts, but to what extent, I'm not entirely sure. Also meet new allies, and I really should watch the spin-off. I'll need to devote some time to that later. Anyways, when you rescue your friends, you can summon them for a special assist attack, all of whom are Aqua members, of course. And like most Inti Creates titles, this game feels great in the hands. With this and another game based on this Love Life spin-off, Love Life Sunshine fans are eating good. This is Koma Rumelia 2, Stranger's Requiem. It's the sequel to that one Toho game that radically redesigns all of the Toho characters to look like Castlevania characters. Seriously. The game is structured after classic Castlevania, but of course between each level you get to select your sub-weapons and such. The game does feel smooth, and the game is quite difficult, especially when you have to fight bosses given, you know, the whole bullet hell nature. You could also play the original Koma Rumelia as well, as that's also on Steam. I didn't even know they were making a sequel, and now I know. I always find it interesting how there's so many different interpretations of Toho characters, and how many Toho games can exist despite them not being made by the original developers. Next up is Deep Rock Galactic Survivor. I'm not gonna lie to you, I've never played Deep Rock Galactic before, but I've definitely played Vampire Survivors. Yes, it's like Vampire Survivors. And yes, on the surface they look very similar, but the moment-to-moment gameplay is a little bit different. For example, you're in a cave and you can mine valuable resources. Not to mention, at the end of a segment, you need to get to a drop pod. And ultimately, a lot of the differences between this and say Vampire Survivors probably wouldn't show up in the demo. But this definitely seems like a worthy Vampire Survivors like. While I don't think it's gonna overtake Vampire Survivors, could it potentially take over HoloCure? Only time will tell. That said, I don't really cover Vampire Survivor likes anymore because there are just so many goddamn Vampire Survivor likes out there. Like seriously. The genre is oversaturated, but this one's different enough to stand out. Next up is Another Crab's Treasure. It's an underwater Souls-like. Part of me wants to say it's more like Sekiro, but there's no real parry mechanic. So immediately you can tell in this game it's quite different. You can jump and you can do a Yoshi flutter to platform. It's almost like those PS2 platformers, you know? And there's also a grappling hook, like Sekiro. But of course the main defining characteristic of this game is the fact that you can find multiple different shells to inhabit. Many of them have unique abilities known as shell spells. It uses a resource called umami that you get back by hitting enemies with your fork. They do say it's a Souls-like, but in terms of like Souls mechanics, such as having multiple different weapons and, you know, builds and such, I'm not really seeing it, but you know, it is a demo. But honestly, I think the shell mechanic more than makes up for it, especially given that you're going to be cycling through multiple shells as your shells break due to damage. That's different. Also noteworthy is the setting, given that you're in an underwater environment that looks heavily polluted. And this has me wondering what direction the story is going to take, if it's going to be some sort of allegory. Next, we're gonna look at The Last Faith. This here is a Metroidvania inspired by Bloodborne, or at least it seems inspired by Bloodborne. Much like a Soulsborne game, you select a class at the beginning of the game, but you're never fully locked into it. The art style is great. I will say, the one thing I didn't like about Bloodborne was the fact that you had to farm for healing items, and you have to do the same here as well. But as I'm playing this demo, there's always this thought in the back of my mind. What makes this different from most other Metroidvanias that are inspired by Dark Souls or Bloodborne? What makes this one different from, say, Blasphemous? And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure if the demo answered that question or not. But I do suspect some of the more deeper mechanics, some of the bigger differences, will occur in the game, just like, not at the beginning of the game, of course. And plus, at the end of the day, I still think this is a pretty good demo. And of course, what next Fest extravaganza would be complete without a visual novel? This right here is Departed Away. Visual novels are always difficult to evaluate, especially from just a demo. Like some games you can evaluate by, how good their gameplay is or how good their graphics are, but visual novels, you gotta evaluate the whole thing including the story. You take the role of a new exchange student in a new school, meeting new friends. Your main goal is to make friends and potentially find a loved one, maybe. I'm not entirely sure. I will say it seems interesting, especially with its pixel art style. It's an interesting one, and if you've got some time to kill, give it a shot. It's not a very long demo. Next up is the Talis Principle 2. Fan the Deck has told me so much about the original, and he gushes about the original all the time. And so I just had to give the second demo a shot. And I will say, it feels like my IQ went up 100 points per puzzle. That said, I presume this is like the early part of the game, because these puzzles, at first glance, they were difficult, but once I learned the mechanics of the game, I could knock these puzzles out in an instant. But learning the mechanics of these puzzles, well, it took a while, and I'm gonna be honest with you, man. I can't imagine what the endgame puzzles will be like. I might actually have to pick up the first game. Also worth mentioning is that this is on the Steam Deck running out all low settings. But this is a killer puzzle game. I haven't had to think this hard about puzzles since Portal 2. Next up is a game called Maiden Cops. It's an anime-styled beat-em-up. It harkens back to the older days of 2D side-scrolling beat-em-ups. If you thought 2D side-scrolling beat-em-ups were a button masher, then be prepared for a rude awakening. I had to say, this game was absolutely brutal. I had to use a continue on the first level. But to be fair, the first level was a lot longer than most first levels. Then again, I really didn't play all that smartly either. I hardly ever blocked, which yeah, you can do. I also tried camping over enemies' bodies when they got knocked down, which you probably shouldn't do. Yeah, like that, see? I haven't fully explored the combat system in this game, but it seems like there's something there. I want to play as the other characters too, but they're not in the demo. And yes, this is running on the Steam Deck just fine. You can also turn off the CRT effect if you don't like it. All in all, I think it's a fairly decent beat 'em up. It is kind of lewd, but don't worry, it's not a hentai game. And this right here is My Work Is Not Done Yet. Let me be the first to say this is a very visually striking game. Aside from that though, I don't really know what to make of it. It's supposed to be a combination of a narrative-driven game with survival and simulation aspects, but I'm not really seeing it yet. And yes, it's a horror game. Probably the scariest part is that there was a good amount of time where I was just straight up lost in the game. I was lost in the forest and I couldn't find my way back to where I needed to be. This one's a difficult one to evaluate because I can see the bones for potentially a great narrative story here, but the demo kind of just ended abruptly. I do feel like I missed something though, so I'll be diving back into this very soon. And of course, last but certainly not least, Ghost Runner 2. Ghost Runner 2 runs on the Steam Deck, but to be honest, you're better off playing this on a higher powered PC because my god, this game is a massive stutter fest. Every time I dash, block an attack, parry an attack, or die, the game stutters like that. I don't want to play the game on my Steam Deck if it's gonna be like that. Every single time I dodge, or parry, or block, or die, or man... Whatever, I'll play this on my computer because it's actually one heck of a good time. And yes, before y'all ask, I'm on the lowest everything. I lowered every setting I could all the way down to the lowest setting, and I've even enabled FSR 2.0. It also seems like there's visual bugs as well, probably related to this. Do play the demo, but don't play it on your Steam Deck. Play it on a PC instead. There were some other demos I wanted to try out, but unfortunately Mozzolina just didn't launch. And yes, I've also tried this out with Proton GE and Proton Experimental, with no luck. I really did want to try this game out. It's supposed to be a hostile interpretation of an immersive sim, like, you know, like Deus Ex. I guess I will have to try it out on PC, but it's unfortunate that it doesn't work on Steam Deck. And speaking of games that don't work on Steam Deck, there's one demo that's consistently crashed my entire Steam Deck. It's supposed to be a combination of chess and fighting games, but unfortunately, whenever I try to play the game online against people, my Steam Deck just crashes. Like, I move my queen into this other person's queen and like my entire Steam Deck crashes. I haven't encountered any other game that's crashed my entire Steam Deck quite like this. That said, I'm not trying to put the developers down. I'm trying to tell them what my issue is so that maybe they can help out in the future. So there we have it, part 2 of the Steam Next Fest coverage. And I think I've decided at this point there will be a part 3 because there's way more demos this time around than I expected, and way more I want to try out. Probably another 10 games or so, or maybe more. But even then, any other demo I play, I'm gonna compile into one final part. It'll be a very nice trilogy of videos. If you like this video, be sure to press the thumbs up button and spread the good gospel of high-tech lowlife. And if you want to see more high-tech lowlife, be sure to subscribe and press the bell icon for notifications. And for you enlightened individuals, be sure to join my Discord server. And if you wish to support high-tech lowlife, be sure to check out our Patreon page. Links in the description down below.